Okay, everybody, is this one of the greatest comedy motion pictures ever? No. But is it criminally overlooked and a hell of a good time? You bet your ass it is. Okay, today we're taking a look back at 1983's DC Cab. A hell of a fun little ride of a flick and a golden gem that's been long since forgotten. Anyway, before we get to the killer cast and the A-list director, as always, to the trailer.
DC Cab. They've got class.
Where to, baby?
Nowhere with you.
And they care.
You charge Mr. and Mrs. Tomatsu $195? They had a lot of luggage.
Two. We're the worst company in town, and we know it.
Get out of my cab, I'm ready! You don't have to shut us down. This company is closed, pending further investigation.
Make an investment in DC Cab.
If I wanted responsibility, I'd have been a damn sex surrogate.
Fasten your seatbelt. Because they're back on the street. DC Cab.
Okay, this motion picture was directed by Joel Schumacher. Now, he's got a really long career. He had some really big hits back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, we're talking The Lost Boys. How can you not love The Lost Boys? We're talking St. Elmo's Fire. We're talking The Incredible Shrinking Woman and Flatliners and Cousins and Dying Young and Tigerland and 8mm and The Number 23 and The Phantom of the Opera and yeah, he did that Batman and Rob movie, which was a piece of shit. But anyway, he had a long list of really good, really successful flicks. And hey, what could you want more than that? Okay, playing Harold was Max Gail. Now, Max Gail was a really good actor, and I really think he should have had a bigger career than what he did. He never really launched off into being a movie star by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, he did what he did and was what he was. Now, to all of us, he'll always be Wojo Howitz from the Barnaby Miller Show. I mean, we loved that show. That show was the shit. It was awesome. But he's been on a bunch of other TV shows. He was on stuff like Get Christy Love and The Streets of San Francisco and Trapper John MD and Matlock and Amazing Stories and Doogie Howser and Quantum Leap and Walker Texas Ranger and Days of... He was even on Days of Our Lives, I think, for a while. So he had a long career. Did a bunch of stuff. Max Gail should have been bigger, wasn't, but is what it was. What can you do? Now, playing Albert Hockenberry was Adam Baldwin. To me, he'll always be the first motion picture I ever think of him in, and will always be, was from the movie My Bodyguard. I mean, come on, he was the big guy that was a tough guy that wasn't really a tough guy. But he's had such a long career and been in so many things since then. Anyway, obviously, I just said, he was in My Bodyguard. He was in Ordinary People and Full Metal Jacket and Predator 2 and Next of Kin, Radio Flyer, Independence Day, The Pursuit of Happiness, Serenity, and he was in a bunch of TV shows. Everything from Angels to The X-Files to The Visitor, The Cape, whatever. He's tons and tons of stuff. Adam Baldwin. Long career, still going strong, God bless him, whatever. Okay, playing Samson was the legendary, stupendous, iconic, man known just for being himself, Mr. T. And you gotta keep in mind, folks, this was when Mr. T was Mr. T. I mean, we're talking about, he had cartoons, he was in Rocky 3, for Christ's sakes. He was on the A-Team. He was in WWE wrestling. He was everywhere and everywhere at that period of time. Mr. T was like a kind of a mid-level phenomenon in the United States to a degree. So, he's in this. He plays Samson. He was one of the main reasons a lot of people even showed up to go see this motion picture, believe it or not, was to see Mr. T in another movie. Yeah, he was in other stuff. I think Penitentiary 2 or 3 or whatever the hell he was in. Stuff like that. But you knew Mr. T just for being Mr. T. Okay, playing Tyrone was Charlie Barnett. Now, this is a career tragically cut short. I mean, sadly cut short. He had a lot of problems. He was really just like this street comedian type dude. a phenomenal talent that never really matured into what he was supposed to be. You know, he popped up in a couple other things. You know, he popped up on TV in like Miami Vice and They Bite and T.J. Hooker and stuff like that. But he died. He had drug problems and he died of HIV years ago. So it was kind of a waste of a talent. The guy destroyed himself. Yeah, man, it is what it was. But in this motion picture, fucking dude will make you laugh your ass off. And that's the plain and simple truth. Charlie Barnett was one of the lost treasures to comedy that never got a chance to bloom. What can you do, folks? Playing Dell, Gary Busey. And this was Gary Busey when he was prime Gary Busey. And personally, I find this one of my most favorite, endearing Gary Busey roles. I mean, he's been in a bunch of other stuff, obviously, you know what I mean? And this is when he was still with all his faculties before his motorcycle crash and all that kind of shit. Gary Busey was a really good actor, dramatically, comedically, all that kind of shit. Obviously, he was in this. He was in stuff like Lethal Weapon and Under Siege and Point Break and Predator 2 and A Star is Born and Barbarossa and Silver Bullet, Carney, Fooling Around, Big Wednesday, and of course, Buddy Holly. So, Gary Busey, long career. Really was a good actor at one point in time before he became like this, you know, sadly kind of somebody that people goof on. But Gary Busey did a great job in this. He was funny as shit. You gotta watch him. Okay, playing Ophelia was Marsha Warfield. Again, not a big movie career by any stretch of the imagination. Her career was basically almost all entirely mostly television. She was on stuff like Living Single and Moesha and Mad About You and Empty Nest, Veronica's Closet and Family Ties and Hanging with Mr. Cooper, and she was on Riptide, and of course Night Court. So she had a good TV career. You know, she was good in everything I ever seen her in, so she always did her job. You can't knock that shit. Marsha Warfield, good actress, was in this. I told you there's a lot of fucking people in this thing. This thing has got a lot of fucking people in it. Okay, playing Xavier. It's not easy being a man, baby. Paul Rodriguez. Remember, he was kind of a hip comedian back in the day, you know, in the 80s. Kind of had a lot going on. He was around a lot. You've seen him a lot. Not so much now, but at the time, Paul Rodriguez was a name. And he was in other things, you know what I'm talking about? He was in stuff like Bloodwork and Rat Race and Made in America. You know, you kind of forget him in the annals of time. He's, God knows, not as big now as he ever was then. But at the time, he was a name, and he was in this. Another name, another person in this. Okay, playing Mr. Rhythm was Whitman Mayo. Now, for a guy my age who grew up in the 70s, there was nothing cooler than Sanford and Son. And we all know he was religiously on Sanford and Son. That's what really everybody thinks when they think of Whitman Mayo. They think Whitman Mayo, Sanford and Son, Whitman Mayo, Sanford. He's Grady. I mean, that's all you're going to think about. It's just the way it goes. But he's been in other things. He's been in other TV shows. He was in stuff like Beretta and Starsky and Hutch and Vegas and Different Strokes and Give Me a Break, Helltown, Hill Street Blues, 227, Amen, Kenan and Kel, Family Matters, The Cave. I mean, dude, he's been fucking royalty, man. 70s royalty. And by the way, there was other people popping up in this thing. You know, you had the kind of semi-known at the time Barbarian brothers who had their own movie and shit. And you had Bill Maher floating around in this thing. There was a lot of people in this motion picture. It was a really star-studded for its time motion picture. Whatever, let's just get to the story. Alright folks, as always, I'm going to try to keep this to 90 seconds or less. I'm hoping. Anyway, the story is such. You got Albert Hockenberry, Adam Baldwin, and he comes to D.C. to get a job at D.C. Cab. You see, Harold, who runs D.C. Cab, was a friend of his father's back in Vietnam, and his dad always said, be like Harold, be your own boss, be your own man. Albert took that shit seriously, so he goes to D.C. to do the one thing that makes sense in his life, the one financial thing that's going to be a great move, become a cab driver, and someday get a cab company of his own. But whatever. So he goes to the DC Cab and he meets the most unlikely group of whack jobs, psychopaths, lunatics, maniacs, you name it, all crammed into one cab company. That's 90% of your plot. The rest of that is just comedy thrown around it. And oh yeah, there's a girlfriend that he really falls for at the diner. And there's a couple kids that get kidnapped. They're these rich kids, and he's kidnapped with them. And then people think he might be one of the kidnappers, and he's not one of the kidnappers. And the DC cab people have to go there and rescue him and the kids and clear all the stuff up. And in the middle of it, they got this guy who runs, whatever department he runs, and he's out there all the time fighting against them, trying to get their hack licenses pulled and shut them down. The normal shit that you see in a comedy like this. That's the whole story. There's not that much beyond that. I mean, for the love of God, it is what it is. Let's just get going. Okay, folks, I'm going to tell you why I love this motion picture. It's one of those motion pictures where, okay, let's get the basics out of there. It was directed well. I mean, you got Joel Schumacher, is what it is. And it was acted well. I mean, well enough. I mean, you got not actors in there. I mean, you got the Barbarian brothers and Mr. T and some other characters. But you got decent actors in the rest of it, and they do a solid enough job. But the reason this motion picture really works, the reason this motion picture really kicks it into a level that you enjoy it and you remember it, is because of the camaraderie. There's a feel-good vibe about this motion picture. You don't walk out of this motion picture ever on a down note. You always kind of feel lifted up. You always kind of feel like, hey, that was a fun little ride. A bunch of whack packers all packed into one place, doing their job, doing their thing, going on adventures together. It was like an our gang comedy for adults, and they were all nuts, and they were all over the top, and they were all characters, and they all came together out of a love for each other in this company to do whatever they had to do. And it was just simply a feel-good buddy camaraderie, joyful type of motion picture. There's never really a down note in it. Even when you think something's, oh my God, what's DC Cab going to do? You don't really get that feeling. You know that group of people are going to pull themselves up and pull this shit off. You know it. It's just the way this motion picture goes. It's not meant to be serious. It's just a wacky comedy built on friendships and adventure and fun and lunacy. And for that, it will always have a place in my heart forever. Okay, everybody, you get a shot, whether you've heard of it or not. Go take a look at DC Cab. Criminally forgotten, criminally underrated, criminally lost to the annals of time, and it shouldn't be. It was a fun, comedic romp from the 80s that should never be overlooked and should never be forgotten. Check it out, look it up, go watch it, tell me if I'm wrong. Anyway, everybody, have a good night, peace, love, and as always, don't take no shit from nobody.